Hello and welcome to Capitol Hill. Well, first it was Toyota shedding some jobs. Now Holden's cutting around 100 of its casual and flexible workforce. The Holden says the high Australian dollar is to blame. The Coalition says there are some other factors as well. The government says it's in talks with the car maker over its long-term future, and those talks are close to being finalised. The opposition's still in discussions about the fate of its pledge to cut $500 million from car industry assistance. Joining me to discuss this and the day's other topics are Liberal MP Jamie Briggs and Labor MP Kelvin Thomson. Welcome to you both.
Happy New Year to you, Lyndall, and to Jamie.
We'll start first with the Prime Minister and the opposition's reaction to Holden's announcement.
I am determined, and Labor is determined, that whilst ever Labor is here, we will be making cars in Australia. It comes down to a very simple proposition. Are you for jobs or not? We are for jobs. And I reiterate that I believe it is entirely wrong for Mr Abbott and the opposition he leads to be anti the jobs of car workers and to be determined to rip money out of industry co-investment with the car industry. We will continue to work with the car industry. We have a package available of the right size to work with the car industry through our new car plan to make sure that we continue to manufacture cars in Australia.
The issue in relation to the car industry is one that Labor always thinks that the answer to a problem is the quantity of money that you throw at it, whereas the Coalition approach is the quality of the money, and that is one of the stark differences between Labor and the Coalition in their approach to managing the issues confronting the Australian nation.
Kelvin, your government ministers talk a lot about the jobs that Labor's created, but now there's some job shedding going on, unemployment's creeping up. Does that show there is real pain to come in the economic adjustment caused by the high Australian dollar?
Well, there's no doubt, Lyndall, that the mining boom has been causing the Australian dollar to rise, and that is adversely affecting other industry sectors like manufacturing and tourism and education and so on. Now, you can simply say, as the opposition appears to be, that we'll leave these other industries to it. But we disagree with that, and I disagree with that because, in the first place, there are no mining jobs in my electorate. There are, however, in Australia 200,000 jobs in motor vehicle manufacturing and 1 million jobs in manufacturing overall, and some of those are most definitely in my electorate. Secondly, what happens when the resources run out? We don't want to become another Nauru whose economy collapsed completely once the resources ran out. It is very short-sighted to be a one-trick economy.
Jamie, is continued government assistance in whatever form it comes in vital for the survival of the car industry? Do governments have to keep tipping money in?
Well, no, they don't. I mean, at the end of the day, what you're seeing is that the money that's been tipped in, I mean, Kelvin talks about this all being a consequence of this terrible mining boom that the Labor Party doesn't like at all. It's always talking it down. It's always talking about its so-called negative consequences. What they forget to tell you, of course, is that in the last decade, before this so-called dastardly mining boom hit us, the automotive sector received over $12 billion in government assistance. The problem that the Labor Party and those who are advocating, further co-investment, more taxpayers' money for one sector and not another, well, they will never quantify for you is exactly how much money it is which will help this industry survive. There are many factors outside of the control of this industry, and it's hard any time a job goes in our economy. It's hard for the 500 Westpac workers who have lost their job today as well. But the government's not going to co-invest with Westpac, right? But for some reason, this government thinks, this Labor Party thinks that these AMWU workers deserve more attention than anyone else in the economy. But they never back it up with any evidence. They never back it up with any evidence. They just make general assertions that, if you don't have manufacturing, you're not a real economy. I mean, it's just bollocks. Frankly, complete and utter bollocks.
But it's something that the Holden boss said too this morning, isn't it, that government support is necessary for the car industry not only in Australia but in other countries too?
Well, what a surprise that a company would be asking for more money from a government. It doesn't want to reform undertake the necessary reforms it needs to, as Bernie Fraser said last week, a very well-known Labor supporter, made the point last week that the car industry needs to be more productive. You had the Toyota boss today rightly pointing out that the industrial relations in this system in this country is making it impossible for this industry to compete. You've got the carbon tax being put on top of it as well. And yet the Labor Party's only answer to this is not to reform and make the economy much more efficient and effective. Its answer to this is asking these car companies how much more money they want, right? They don't want to ever get an outcome. They don't ever want to tell us exactly how much it will be to sort of co-invest, which will keep the car industry here in the future. They just make these general assertions that you've got to do it, and if you don't do it, it'll all disappear and it'll be an economic catastrophe. Well, tell that to the thousands of small businesses each year who never get a cent of government assistance, who go under out of one circumstance or another. Why don't they get the money that these people get?
Kelvin, should the government take a good look at the industry assistance to make sure it's being spent correctly and is furthering even the aims of the government to drive innovation, to drive industry change?
Well, it's certainly done that and continues to do that, Lyndall, but I'm really troubled to hear Jamie suggesting that it doesn't matter if we don't have an ongoing motor vehicle manufacturing industry in Australia. I disagree with that completely. We need the research and development. We need the engineering skills that come with having that industry. Furthermore, Jamie implies that the government is providing financial support for manufacturing but not in other areas. That is again untrue. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, the financial support provided to the mining industry in 2009-10 exceeded $1 billion, whereas that for manufacturing was around $887 million. So more in government subsidies for mining than there is for manufacturing. There is also substantial Australian government support for agriculture, for tourism, for other industries as well. The point is, we shouldn't be a one-trick pony. We should have a diversified economic base.
Jamie, Tony Abbott outlined at the Press Club earlier this week saying he wants government to be smaller. Should a coalition government be looking at industry assistance across the board?
Well, look, half that, again, there's no evidence of what Kelvin's just put to. The suggestion that the mining industry somehow gets subsidies is completely misleading. What we've said for a very long time is that the auto manufacturers in this country, and we're talking about one stream of manufacturing. It does not mean all manufacturing at all. In fact, most manufacturing doesn't get assistance. We're talking about three companies in effect, three multinational companies that get large wads of cash from this government. And for a very long time, the Howard government pursued transitional assistance, which is right, to help them adjust, which actually puts aside this argument that this is all driven by the dollar. Remember, $12 billion over the last decade. The problem now is that the Labor Party is changing the terms of this, and they favour one industry over another, and that has dire consequences for those industries. I mean, where's Kelvin saying that the 500 Westpac workers, who I'm sure there's some in his electorate, why are they not important? Shouldn't the government be co-investing in Westpac today? I mean, this is the farce of the argument. Ultimately, government has a role in our economy, but it's not picking winners. And that's what the Labor Party wants to do. The party of pink bats wants to pick the next successful industry in the Australian economy.
Of course, Lyndall, the finance sector jobs are important as well, but the fact is that Australian government policies have kept unemployment in Australia much lower than that in other countries which have been affected by the global financial crisis in much greater measure. We have done well in steering Australia through the global financial crisis. The problem here is that the policy that the coalition is suggesting, taking $500 million out of the automotive industry, is doing damage right now, because people in Detroit and Tokyo and so on look at what is happening in Australia and the prospect that an Abbott government may remove this money. So the opposition needs to clarify this issue ASAP.
If we could move on, Kelvin, I couldn't let you go without asking you a couple of questions about the Labor leadership. There are senior figures in the government who are frustrated with the continuing speculation, but there's no denying that Labor MPs, some Labor MPs, are talking about it. What would your message be to those Labor MPs who are looking at the primary vote, getting nervous about Labor Party's position and maybe even thinking of a leadership change?
Well, Lyndall, at any given point in the political cycle, Labor Party, Liberal Party, over time, whatever leader, any energetic journalist can always find half a dozen members of the political party who would like a change of leader. We have a caucus of 102 members. It doesn't mean a change is going to happen.
You were quite scathing of how things were under Kevin Rudd on the day that Julia Gillard took over the leadership. It may be hypothetical, but what would your view be if Kevin Rudd again sought to take over the leadership?
Well, I think it is hypothetical, Lyndall, and I'm not going to fuel it by adding my own commentary to it. It is quite clear to me that Julia Gillard enjoys the support of the overwhelming number of members of the caucus, and so the leadership speculation is frankly idle, and we've got much more important things that we as a country ought to be talking about.
Jamie, as you look at leadership speculation that is going on about the Labor government, is there a risk that members of your own party may sit back and think your chances of just riding into office are getting easier every day?
Oh, well, quite obviously Tony Abbott's not doing that. He gave a very long and detailed speech 2 days ago. It was an excellent speech about his economic direction if he was to become Prime Minister. We don't take anything for granted. But what really is concerning is that the Labor Party is involved in this bitter public knife fight with ministers calling other ministers prima donnas, accusing them of not being loyal team players. When remember that the person they're talking about is the Foreign Minister of our country. I would hope our Foreign Minister is working in a team as part of a government policy. So it does, I think, show that there's a major concern out there that the eye's off the ball on the Labor Party side. That the We Are Us speech that Julia Gillard gave last year obviously doesn't include all the members of the Labor caucus.
Does it put more weights on your side, though, to make the economic case, to come up with firm figures on how you would fund your policies?
Well, we're doing that. We're working that through. Joe Hockey and Andrew Robb, the Shadow ERC, is working through line by line, looking at each budget proposal. We've made tough decisions. The $500 million we've removed from, we've proposed to be cut from the auto assistance is a good example of that, where that was an area where we've found some savings, and we'll continue to work through and find savings because we know it's important to find to get the budget back into surplus and to pay down Labor's debt, to have government's role in our society where it's needed and not extended beyond that. And that's where we'll have to leave it. Jamie Briggs and Kelvin Thomson, thank you very much for your time.
Good to talk with you.
Thanks, Lyndall.
And thank you for joining Capitol Hill today. Joining Capitol Hill. Join us at the same time tomorrow. Goodbye.